Are we on? Okay. I'm just going to sit here because it makes my head feel better. This works good. This looks casually professional, right? Instead of I'm lazy. So, do we have some of our online audience? Can you set my timer? Just set it for one. We'll just encompass both of these. Yeah, just set it for 1 hour. I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. That's what I was wondering. Pages like.
Okay, we are back. We have a few people online. So, any reflections from the blogger episode this morning? Yes, I'm available for road trips, so I can come help you anytime you need. I can also help you virtually if you need some help. The good and bad part about being part of Nemo is that I don't have a day job. This is my day job, so there's nothing for me to go back to and help with except this. So if there's something you need help with, I'm always available.
How often do y'all do display?
This is only the second time I've done. No, third time. We did. What year was that? What year was Maine? I think it was 2015. Yeah, 2015 it was, because I remember 2015 we did a 3-day social media training in Portland, Maine, and we live streamed it. And then last year in March, myself and Brad Patassi out of Arizona did 3 days in New York City for FDNY, and we live streamed the first day, and then this one. And we got snowed out the first day, so our live stream kind of went to hell in a handbasket because everybody had to go home at 1 o'clock. Or they had an inch of snow after all. For we Alaskans, that's, you gotta have a lot more snow than that to stop anything. But in New York, it shut everything down. So, okay, so we have a couple things here that we have actually touched on before, but just in case, I'll review some of it, but it won't take nearly as long as we thought. And I'll review it because if there's someone perhaps who wants to tune in for this particular session that wasn't here earlier, then they might not know when we dropped it in elsewhere. We were going to talk about incident-specific pages and why to do them, and we talked about that in this class, but we'll review that. The reason that I believe, and I am open to the fact that there are people who feel differently. I disagree with them, but I'm open to the fact I know there are people who disagree with it. But we do incident-specific pages because the amount of stuff that we post will overwhelm the normal use of that site, whatever it is. If it's their Facebook page or a blog or their Twitter account, we have so much information going out on a fire that they won't be able to do any other business. And that's usually a good point or a way to argue why it's a good idea to have one. I was thinking what Kathy said the other day was that here's another good reason. If Kathy, who's, for those online, the public affairs person on the National Forest in North Carolina, if the fire starts on someone else's land, say it's state of North Carolina or something, it starts on state land, but the fire grows and now it's coming on to National Forest land, Kathy needs, and the smoke, or even just the smoke is coming into Kathy's people's jurisdictional area. She needs to be able to tell her people where to go for information about this fire. And it's not necessarily to the state of North Carolina website, but she needs someplace that's consistently going to give them just the information that they want about the incident, right? So it's helpful to public affairs people to have, and to anyone in the town, to have someone to point to that's giving that information. And in a crisis, people don't want all the other stuff you're posting. I mean, it's great that your forest has Smokey the Bear going to the 4th of July parade, and it's great that you're having Salmon Fest and having a coloring contest for kids on the thing. But people who are in fear of losing their homes or potentially their lives don't want to hear about that. They need something that's focused on what they're worried about. And so incident-specific pages do that. Sometimes the people that are opposed to it are concerned about how it's going to be taken down. Like what will happen to it when you go. I don't want it just hanging out there. And when you take down these pages, you take them down the same way you end IncieWeb. You know, you do a post that says this is going to be the last post on this page. There is some transition protocol, I think would be the right way to call it, when you're leaving. If about 3 days out, we know. We've kind of got the glide path. We know when we're going. And then I call the forest person and I say, or whatever, whoever's land we're on, and say, so we have the Facebook page, we have the blog, we have Twitter, whatever we have. What are you capable of maintaining? What do you want me to leave up? Now, this is assuming that we're the last team in. If we're transitioning to another team, I make the same phone call to the PIO on the incoming team. And I say, this is what we have up. What are you going to be capable of maintaining? And they'll say, oh my gosh, I only have one person, and she's kind of new. She can probably maintain the Facebook page, but if you could hand the Twitter account back over to the forest, or end the Twitter account, and we don't know how to do the blog, so just okay. So then I start transitioning people from the blog. Our posts include, this blog will only be up until Friday. After that, all fire information will be on the Facebook page at this link. And we just post that all the time to start transitioning people back to the Facebook page. And then they take over the Facebook page. If I'm handing it back to the forest, I ask them what they can maintain. If they say nothing, then we post those kinds of messages on Friday. These pages will be gone on, whatever. We just continue to transition it to nothing. We usually, when I say nothing, I mean we usually have to have at least somewhere to send people. So we at least provide the public affairs officers official email, or wherever Kathy wants me to send people that have questions, where do you want them to call? And she'll usually give me the front desk, frontliners, or somebody will have something, and we'll just hand people off there. And then, sometimes I ask them, do you want me to leave the page up, or do you want me to take it down? Usually they say they don't care, in which case I usually leave them up because I use them for teaching, and other people can use them for teaching. So we leave them up to demonstrate for demonstration purposes. So that's one of the reasons. I think incident specifics are most useful to consumers because there is a real need to have it be all about you when you're in a crisis. I need it to be focused on what I need, and so that's what an incident specific page will do. And because it's very, very busy stuff, and there'll be no time or place for any of your normal stuff in there anyway. So, and let's see. Also, it allows you to put on the official fire information logo. And if you want people to recognize that, and you want it to be then on your bulletin board so there's a connection between what they see online and what the official spots are elsewhere, you need to be able to put your logo on it. You can't do that on an agency page because it has the Forest Service logo and not that. Anyway. And when, I'd say, and remember we talked about on Twitter, there's the fast follow. You can do that on an incident specific page so that people can get tweets on their cell phone as a text message, and that's very handy for officials in towns where there's a fire, and they want it just about your incident. They don't want everything on the forest. They just want stuff about their town, their people, their incident. And the only way to do that is have an incident specific page. I guess when you shouldn't create sites, we went over this in the protocols. If you can't support it, if you don't have the power, the internet, cell service, people, if you don't have any of that, then don't do it. That's one reason not to do it. If you can't, and if you don't have the staff, if you build it, they will come. And if they come, you need to be able to communicate with them. It's a two-way street. Social media is a conversation. It's not a place to just post information. That's a website. The power of social media is in the conversation. It's in the exchange of information. It's the closest people can get to reaching out and touching you, is that there's someone there that says, I'm listening. So you have to be listening, and you have to be speaking back. So if you can't do that, if you don't have the people that can engage that way, if it's just me, I know I can build it, but I can't take care of it. I can't make it interactive like it should be. Then don't do it. Wait till you have the right number of people. Sometimes people just don't want you to build any social media sites, and you do what you have to. Sometimes I have the discussion with myself, we have a delegation, right? When a team comes in, we have a delegation, and the delegation gives us the legal right and responsibility to operate an incident the way we see fit. That's why incident commanders carry $1 million in liability insurance because they can be sued because they're personally liable for how they run the incident. Well, that means all of us have a responsibility, a legal responsibility. Once it's handed over to us, it is legally our responsibility. So if I feel very strongly that we need these sites, and the forest person is going, no, I don't want you to do it, I don't want you to do it, but I really think we should, that would have to be a discussion that probably the IC and the forest supervisor had, or somebody at a higher level than my pay grade, if I really felt strongly that we needed to. But I haven't encountered that significant opposition very often. So sometimes more of it's where we want to drive people. We want to drive them to INCIWeb or drive them to social media sites. So it's that's about it. Are there any questions about why we do or how we do incident-specific pages? Nothing online? She probably has her headphones in and she can't hear me. Huh?
Just crickets out there.
Cricket. Okay. All right. Don is now going to talk to you about what tools, and we've covered some of this, but again, we'll do it in case there's people online.
Okay, we're going to talk about how we choose the tools. We've gone over a lot of tools. We're going to continue to go over tools. But how and why we use those tools. I want you guys to tell me how you think when we show up on a fire, how you think you can find out what tools might be best to use in the area you're going.
Check with the host agency.
Check with the host agency.
You're searching various social media sites, you know that people are posting there.
Yeah, so search social media sites, see what people are posting. What else?
Some of it's going to have to do with the connectivity.
Connectivity. Yep. So yeah, all these things need to be taken into consideration. One of the first things that I do is I do a search to find out where people are posting, what they're posting, and what social media platform. There's times where I'll go to a fire and I do a search on Twitter and you don't find anything, but you'll find stuff on Facebook. Sometimes you'll find the opposite. Sometimes you won't find anything out there. So those are some of the things you look at first, and then making a phone call to the host agency. Find out what they use. How do you do a search? Go into just a search box of Twitter. I'll do a search on Facebook, and then I'll just do a general search on Google. Fire name, fire location. Sometimes the name of the fire isn't what the public is using. They may call it a fire near a certain town or a certain area. So look up that stuff, and then when you talk to the host agency, find out what they use. And like Chris mentioned, Colorado is very Twitter heavy. I know anywhere I go in Colorado, for the most part, people are going to want to use Twitter, but there are places that still don't use it. They use Facebook. But most people know their audience. Most people know what their local community uses. Whether that be Facebook, Twitter, or nothing. There's places where you may not have any cell service. So tools that are intentionally redundant, user comfort, more mobiles, kind of what I have in my notes. So user comfort, you want to see what people are used to, and you want to try to stay within that. We find a lot, or I do anyway, I find a lot that when we go places, people are used to InstaWeb. I'm not a huge fan, like Chris is not a huge fan of InstaWeb. It's clunky. It's hard to update sometimes. You don't have the capability of giving multiple small updates all day long. But people are used to that. Is there an InstaWeb page? Where's InstaWeb? I'll get calls from Forest Supervisor. Where's InstaWeb? Why isn't it up yet? Or counties. Why isn't InstaWeb up yet? The InstaWeb, you're kind of limited to people who have access to InstaWeb. So I've gone to counties where they don't even know what InstaWeb is. They don't have an account, and we can't start an InstaWeb page for the fire if it's a county jurisdiction fire and they don't have an account.
One of the issues, at least I notice here, like on the east, I know in South Carolina, is you're right, there's very few users. I think in our state, me and maybe one other might be a user. And the problem is there's nobody to put that information. We had to put
Right, and we run into that, and what the question comment was that they've gone to a fire and there hasn't been anybody to update that information, and so there's none in InstaWeb, right? And we run into that. People don't know how to use it as far as folks on the agency side, but the public does get used to it, so that's their comfort level. That's where they want to go. So you just have to try to quickly figure out what you're going to do with that. I've got on the help desk with InstaWeb several times and tried to explain to them that I want to start an account for a county. And they say, well, what's your position in that county? Well, I'm not with the county. Okay, well, we can't just open up a county page for somebody that doesn't work for them. You need to get permission. And so it's this whole process of trying to get them to approve some random person to be the total admin for InstaWeb when they don't even know how to use it. So it's kind of clunky to try to get that going and try to get it working and turn that back over when the team leaves. So InstaWeb's a good tool. There's a lot of people that are used to that in the country, but on the back end, there's not a lot of people who know how to work in InstaWeb.
Yeah, and I've run into California.
Mm-hmm.
CAL FIRE has their own site where they do their own thing. I went on one time, I was coming out, I got found about the fire. I was pulling up, I couldn't find, I thought, how can there not be an InstaWeb? And I found out, well, CAL FIRE's running it. There is no InstaWeb site.
Yep.
So CAL FIRE is transitioning to us and we create, I guess, if we
So
want to use it.
CAL FIRE does do their own pages. So if you are in California on a CAL FIRE fire, they're managing, then they're going to use their own page. They won't transfer that into InstaWeb at all because they'll be the jurisdiction on that. So it really is going to be housed in the person who has jurisdiction in InstaWeb. And the original comment on that, if you guys online didn't hear it, was CAL FIRE does not use InstaWeb. They use their own site for information. And if you're out there, are they going to turn that over to you to create an InstaWeb? So CAL FIRE does their own thing, and totally different. And most users in California are used to going on and looking at the stuff on the CAL FIRE website. So again, user comfort, know your audience, and then you can start picking your tools. I did bring a couple of examples of, they're up on the page there, of things that we've done when we can't use the tools that we usually use. So we've talked a lot about Yellowstone, and I've had a few fires up in that neck of the woods on the Shoshone National Forest. There's no cell service up there at all. And so you are limited to one-on-one, face-to-face conversations for the most part. So we've had to resort to old school tactics and do a lot of trapline stuff up there. One fire in particular, they didn't have, not only did they not have cell service, but nobody had internet access out there either. So they didn't have internet to their houses. It was right outside of Yellowstone where people from the 80s were still upset at the Forest Service and the Park Service for starting fires that supposedly burned their homes. And we had a lot of work to do in terms of trying to make them feel comfortable with burning operations that were going to be happening on the fire. So one of the things that we did was we put Brad Patassi, some of you guys know him, we put Brad at the general store, and Brad just hung out with the people at the general store literally all day long. And the folks from the general store, they'd come in, they had a little slider cabinet of single beers, and they'd come in, they'd grab a beer, and they'd go sit on the porch. And Brad would go out and sit on the porch with them. I don't think he had any beers, but he'd sit on the porch with them, and he'd just talk to them all day. And some of those guys were in there all day long, and he made some really good friendships. He taught a lot of people of what they were doing, gained a lot of trust with the community out there. We would have public meetings fairly often. We held them at the same general store. I think 2 or 3 public meetings in my career I've gone to where the people at the public meetings all had alcohol with them. All 3 were in that same corridor in Wyoming. So they just moved from the side of the general store where they were drinking at the couch over to the community meeting. Everybody was there, and we were able to talk to them. They wanted to listen to what we had to say. So having Brad in that store and the one-on-one conversations really gained a lot of trust in the community there. We also, at that point, we had folks that were outside of the local canyon there, in Cody, Wyoming, and even surrounding areas that could see the smoke. And they did have internet access. So the way that we dealt with that is that we would have somebody over in Cody that stayed in a hotel, and we would either literally fax stuff to the Forest Service office, and she would pick it up, and then she'd take the information and she would put it out on social media. So we were able to get the folks that could access the social media, and then we had the folks that could not either. And those guys in that canyon learned a lot just from the one-on-one conversations. And we had some older folks come in, and we did the daily briefings, and you can see when the ops folks go around, they talk about divisions, and they talk about, Division Alpha and Bravo and Charlie, and every day they do these briefings, and we'd have ladies that'd come in, and probably ladies in their 70s, and they'd come into the table and they'd get a map and they'd pull it out and they'd say, "Oh, over here in Division Delta, what are they doing over there? They finished that piece of line that they were putting in?" I mean, she had the language down, and we knew that these people were gathering the information and getting what we wanted them to get. So we had to go old school. We had to go, and then we also were able to use the new tools. So knowing your audience, knowing the tools that you have, and being willing to go outside the box and do some things a little different. So we had another fire in the same corridor called the June Fire, and this one my team was on. Again, no cell service. We had satellites and still no Wi-Fi. We had nothing in that canyon. We had grizzly bears wandering through camp, but we had no Wi-Fi. We had nothing in there. So instead of going out an hour to where we could get service, what they decided to do was spike me out with the hotshot crews for 3 days. So after a while, when this fire was going on, we had hotshot crews that would go up every day, and they were cutting indirect line. And we would come on every day and talk about the line that they were cutting. The containment numbers weren't changing. They didn't understand what was happening. They couldn't see what was happening. We had no way to get them pictures. We had nothing. So we found out that there was cell service on the top of the mountain where everybody was working. And I went up for 3 days, and I just Facebooked from the top of the mountain for 3 days. And so we would share. They took the fire page down, but if you look, here's just some videos that we posted. And you can see here, so my job was to teach the public what these guys were doing day in and day out, because they thought they were doing absolutely nothing up there. And so we would show them cutting these big chunks of line, and they could see what they were doing. We would show some of the air operations. And we talked about in this post how the crews were working the piece of line. The helicopter was coming in. We talked about how it was teamwork with the helicopters, with the hand crews, and they could get a visual of what we were doing up there. The community absolutely went crazy over this stuff. They loved it. They loved finally seeing what these people were doing day in and day out. We had no way to get to them, but we were able to think outside the box and to use the tools that we had. And the Facebook page exploded once we got up there. Those are your alerts. Wait a minute, what happened? So anyway, again, knowing your tools, choosing the tools correctly, and capitalizing on what people use in those local areas.
I think, Don, the part that Don mentioned about being creative about it, there are a lot of really creative ways to use a tool besides for just the traditional, we're going to put our press release in maps and all those kinds of things. If Facebook on the top of the mountain is the only thing you can get, then do it. I mean, if that's the tool that's appropriate and it has the right audience and it allows you to meet some of your communication strategy by connecting with the community in some way, then do it. And it may not be the traditional way. It may not be sitting in camp posting whatever, because you can't get a signal in there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to use the forest sites because you don't have any signal. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times you're sitting in the middle of the woods with no signal, and you're going, what do I do? Nothing? No, you can't do nothing. So you do old school, and then you send stuff. If the only thing you have is email, or maybe all you have is somebody on a jump drive driving to town every day, give it to the Forest PAO and have them post it on it. Do whatever you have to do, to get the information. We I was telling Don earlier today, I think it was today, we had a meeting. We were on it was called the Paradise Fire. It's on Olympic National Forest, up Mount Jefferson. And it was which is odd, it was a fire in a rainforest, and it was a national park. And so a lot of education, and why is there fire in the rainforest, that sort of thing. But there's a long distance, because here's the mountain, and Port Angeles is way up here at the top of Washington. Long highway down through Forks, and all the way down to Quinault, and down this direction. And Quinault, from where our camp was, we were at the Park Service headquarter office, was about 4 hours down and 4 hours back. Well, unfortunately, the way this worked, because of the mountain, there were these drainages that came up the mountain, and the marine fog and the smoke would come in. The marine fog would hold everything in, and then the marine fog would go out, and all the smoke would pour down, and it would pour down the drainages into all these areas that were nowhere near us, and so it would pour down into Quinault, and they would get scared, and they would want to know what was going on, and they wanted a public meeting. Well, you normally have an operations person and a incident commander or somebody at a public meeting, but they can't be gone for 8 hours. We had a small team. There was only 7 or 8 of us, and we can't have half of them gone to a public meeting for 8 hours. So how do we hold a public meeting? Give them what they need, and not so. We use a tool called it's a meeting she uses Zoom all the time, and Adobe Connect was one we used. So we set up a table like this with the park ranger and our incident commander and the ops person, and we put a microphone in front of them. And down at the other end in Quinault, there was a guy who, I think he was a teacher, or he ran the superintendent of schools or something. He got into the school. They had a smart board, and he said, if we do an Adobe Connect meeting, he said, I'll project it on the smart board so they can see you, and then I'll have the microphone in my computer, and I can repeat the questions for you. So I facilitated like I would any meeting, and said, we're here to have a meeting for that, and here are these people, and they're going to give you a briefing on what's going on, and they did. And then from down there, they asked there were about 50 people down there in a room all by themselves with a smart board, and they said it was the best public meeting they'd ever had. I was like, we just made do. We did what we had to do, because we didn't have anything, we couldn't do anything else. So, I think being creative with how you use the tools, with you pick the right tool, and then how you use the tool, there's like nothing you can't do. Like we did with our little movies, we had, still stuck on had a paper, camera, and music fade. So, you make do with what you have to get the message across.
You do, and I think that's the important thing to learn here, is that be flexible, and I think we all do that in our job, but that goes for social media too. I mean, you can waste your time all day long posting stuff on Facebook, but if that community is not going to pay attention to Facebook, you're wasting your time. If you plan on going in with your social media strategy and you plan on using this massive amount of social media and nobody can access the internet, you're kind of wasting your time. So know those tools. Learn how you can use those tools to spread your message, to get that information out, even if it's not in the typical way. Know the ways that you can do that, and think outside the box. Picking your tools is kind of the key to social media success and PIO success. Yes.
Yes.
If the terminology, I'm sure it is used here because you're teaching, but if the terminology old school, is that sending a message of a negative message for the ones that would be would hear that in the public and think, oh, I don't want the old school stuff, I want the new stuff?
I don't think we would ever use that term publicly.
No.
It's more so people, because we get people all the time that say, well, what about the stuff we've always done traditionally? And I'm saying we should still do that.
Yeah.
And so we just divide it up by saying old school, new school. But there's no disrespect meant in old school, not at all. I don't think there's any stuff that I used to do years ago that I don't still do. We still have public meetings. We still do run trap lines. We still meet one-on-one with people that need to have one-on-one. I still tell PIOs, your number one job on the trap line is to connect with people. So if you have to be out there 12 hours a day, be out there 12 hours a day. If you have to sit in a cafe and have coffee with 400 people, then that's what you do, because your job is to build relationships while things are okay. And building relationships is an old school way of doing things. People want to switch to this new way. You know, oh, we have this fancy new thing we can do. And if they drop some of those personal connection pieces, it's old school in the world to go one-on-one with people.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that's kind of it comes from my parents and grandparents era, where you didn't call people, you went to their house and you talked to them. Because making that personal connection thing was important. And as we've adopted technology that lets us connect over FaceTime or on Skype or however else we do it, you know, you lose that touch. But in a crisis, that touch becomes really personal. The ability to actually shake someone's hand or speak to them personally is important, and we want people to know that that's important to continue doing. Really important.
Yeah, I think it is. It's an important tool that we use. I think we just, as we put information out, sometimes we are very heavy. Well, most times we're very heavy in the social media realm. But we can't forget when we need to switch the opposite way, and we need to go heavy into the one-on-one, the trap lines, being at the general store, being there in person to talk to people. Those are the important things that should never be forgotten, but sometimes you have to just go heavy on that.
Okay, any more questions about the tools or anything else? We know we've been over that a little bit already. So we want to move into the part that you might be, many people are interested in, and that is lessons learned and the what to do about. And I try to capture these. You know, you'll notice all these come from incidents I was on, which means bad stuff happens to all of us. And, you know, how you deal with it and how you respond to it. And I really try, I have to stop myself. I know that when we were on Berry Point Fire and when this happened, I was with Bree Pettit, who's from Arizona, very experienced in social media. And our instinctive reaction when we first saw it, she said, she was watching for me, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you should see what this person is saying." I said, "What?" And I got on, I'm like, "Oh my God." She goes, "I'm answering." I said, and I said, you know, let's give it a minute. And we read it, and I said, you know, I'm reminded that I have told people for years, be strategic in your response. Let's be strategic in our response. Let's think about what we want to accomplish with this. And we took our time and thought about it. And we watched, and she would say, I'm not sure we have to do anything. The community is tearing this person up. And we didn't have to do anything, you know. And then we started getting people saying it appeared we weren't watching or paying attention because we weren't responding, and they were concerned, or do something. We're getting private messages. Get rid of this person. You know, make this go away. This isn't right. You should jump all over it. So we decided that we needed to say something. So so I captured this when we were doing it. This was in 2012, and this is in the student resource folder under lessons learned. But so I had asked, you know, the Voss to prepare things for me. They were. I'll go down here to where this starts. So this is the picture that started it all, right over here. It's a picture of Mike Morcom, who was the incident commander. He's just speaking at morning briefing. That's all. Nothing. We post these all the time. So the comment was that the person posted said, "I can hear it now. This is big dollars, men and women. Your paychecks depend on this fire burning up as long as possible. The longer we can let her burn, the bigger all of our pockets will get. So be careful out there. Eat a good lunch. Be sure you take all your government-mandated breaks every 15 minutes, whether you need it or not. Oh, and don't forget hacky sack playoffs are tonight, following directly after dinner, so be sure to practice on that while you're standing around watching the fire today." We're like, really? Okay. So, is there anything in there that's defamatory? No.
Implications.
The implication is only that they're standing around. It's inappropriate. Not defamatory is a legal definition. There's nothing in there that's defamatory. There's no foul language. It is someone's opinion about how we respond to fires. We're like, So we're like, wow, you know, we thought about it. So at this point, we said here we were kind of concerned, but we saw an opportunity to think about how we were going to respond, what we should say. So then the community started, responding, and we see people saying, I can't believe you had the nerve to post that. A few days ago, a young girl lost her life protecting your towns, your forests from complete destruction. I know crews have been on this fire, working 16-hour days in the heat, lugging 50-pound packs and chainsaws, trying to keep it from destroying everything in its path. They're getting 4-hour rest periods to sleep. They're beginning to step to the defense of, right? Another one, oh my gosh, shame on you, and to all the hardworking men and women who are putting your own safety and well-being on the line for communities, thank you, thank you, thank you. So we start seeing, some response. Not only was what you say disrespectful, untruthful, and condescending, I can't even take it seriously, as your post is riddled with misspellings and grammatical errors. So you can't have a cogent argument, if you don't spell things right. So then another post comes on, and she says, oh, come on, all of you, answer me this one question, just one. Why would they not have put this out when it was 300 acres, when it didn't cost a life or more? I'm not the disrespectful one. Are you so blinded from the smoke that you haven't questioned that fact? This fire absolutely should never have been allowed to get beyond. And who gives a rat about misspellings and grammatical errors? This is a forest fire, life-threatening event taking place, not a writers' club party. Get your head out of the burnt ground and take a serious look at what's really going on. So it just continues, and continues to be, but I was amazed at how many people, very knowledgeable people, responded. So we're watching, and people were dealing with this just fine. I mean, at this point, we didn't have to go in and jump on this person or say anything or even engage, and we were still thinking about how we wanted to do this. Knowledgeable people like this person said, you obviously, the one down here, have no knowledge of what affects a fire, humidity, wind change, or that crews work around the clock. Some protect homes because that's what they trained on. Others fight the fire and keep it from spreading. Volunteers like my husband come from all over the state, risking their lives to try and contain the blaze. Get educated and be thankful you're not out there with a hose trying to do it yourself. This continued. It continued on. So we looked at it, and at some point, I'm thinking, and you can read all these, and they're all in there, in that folder. Here's another guy who said, a little insight for you. The fire was reported as a single tree lightning strike. After the 2-mile hike into the point of origin with a dozer, the fire had grown to 10 acres. The fire spread so fast that it created a fire whirl, which are basically dust devils made of fire. This was bad enough to rip small trees from the ground. Those out on the line aren't concerned with money. They want sleep and some food. Please don't criticize what you don't know, and be thankful through hard work and determination no one's lost their home or their lives. And I was kind of amazing. It's very powerful to have someone else answering that question, not us. And the interesting part, he was right. Those things had happened. It was not a story that had been told in the beginning of the fire, but he was right. I don't know if this guy was on the initial crew. I don't know who he is, so I don't know. But he was right. And so, we sat and we waited a little bit longer, trying to decide what, if anything we should do. So she posts again. 10 acres with a dozer in hand and a competent operator could have had it out. I know the land like the back of my hand. No exist for that fire to now be not 30,000 acres, but now nearly 60,000. And the plan of action, burnout. So tell me the mindset isn't about money and the people involved, boots on the ground working their rears off, suffering through it. What about them? If any of you really cared, you'd be on your phone to your governor asking why this is allowed to happen. People out there fighting this fire is very concerned about the money. It's their job, and they're there because it's one of the few things that pay well. I know many people that do that line of work, and they all pray for a good fire season. Why money? It's hard, harsh, and it's the truth. We all know disaster of any kind is big money. I guess I'm the only one with the fits and honesty to call it like it is. Now, so far, all this is someone expressing their opinion. It's not a new opinion. It's not an opinion we don't hear all the time, that we're just out there for the money. So, I know that. So I can't really say, shut her off entirely, because she's expressing her opinion, and people disagree with her, and they're taking care of, But it was about here we thought that we ought to drop in a comment so people wouldn't think that we were ignoring it, and we thought about how we should say it, how it gave us an opportunity, especially this last comment, to talk about how we fight fire. However, this was never a managed for resource benefit fire. And we discussed putting out in the status update. We started to draft one, but then we didn't post it, and we waited a little longer. And it was about 2.5 hours after the first negative post and seeing the community do what they did that we posted our policy statement. And what we said was we pinned it to the top of the page. And it said, while we appreciate that sometimes other opinions can be difficult to hear, we create these pages so that everyone can have a voice. There are always strong opinions associated with wildland fires, and we believe that people need and want to talk to each other about what's happening. That said, We do have policies regarding abusive or threatening language, sexist, racist, or defamatory comments, and we will uphold those policies. That's all we said. We didn't address her. We didn't address any of her posts. We didn't address the chain of information. We posted at the top, and I think we got, what was it, 62 likes just for the policy statement alone, on the top. So people heard us. We said, we know. That's why we built the page, so people can express their opinions. We know it's hard to hear. But we thought a long time about what we wanted to say and how we were going to engage with it. And what I'm saying is, it's a good idea if you think about this ahead of time. How are you going to engage when it's somebody who's just kind of being, and like her. It's not defamatory. She's not using foul language. It's just her opinion. And it's a strongly held opinion. And it's mean to people who are out there working on the fire line. But, you're allowed to be mean in America. There's no law against it. And you can be mean on Facebook. So after this, I did ask, there were some larger posts by her. You can read them if you want to go in and read all of the posts. So at the end, there were a lot. This went on a long time. And one thing I would tell you is that remember that on Facebook, let me go down. This continues on. I'm going to find the part. On Facebook, this is something to think about. When people post things, only about 3 posts show, like 3 replies. There'll be a post, about 3 or 4 will show on the front, and the rest will say see more. And even when you go in there, the replies will be collapsed up into a replies, and you have to open that. So all these comments and things being said were not visible to everybody who visited the page. At some point, they're hidden in there. Now, if you're in the conversation, if you've responded in some way, you will be notified when someone responds in your string, and you'll get a notice that, but it'll say, so if they know the name, if they knew this person's name and said so-and-so has replied to a comment, they might go, oh my gosh, I don't want to. They don't have to go there and read it. But it does collapse, so you don't have to worry about it being like right there on your page all the time for everybody to look at. That's one good news. So after this, I came from a corporate public relations background, and I decided to ask a friend of mine who still works in New York in public relations and what she thought. I sent her the whole string, and she said, first, the very use of social media presumes that the dialogue and sharing will result. There's going to be good and bad posts. And when there are negative posts, the best outcome is that other fans and friends will make your case or defend your perspective or policies, and that's exactly what happened in this case. Social media presumes transparency. If you were to have deleted it, you would have inflamed the situation by 1, enforcing what the negative poster said in her initial post and reiterated several times that the system was at fault as it was less than responsive. And 2, encouraging her to keep posting, because her stuff was being deleted, encouraging her to keep posting, thereby putting you in a situation of worrying more about her posts and whether to delete them again and again instead of focusing on things you should be focusing on. And 3, deterring your defenders from posting all that great information about the tasks and issues at hand. Those people don't come out of the woodwork just randomly say nice things on your page. They're never there. But when somebody does that, all of a sudden, look at all the people that express their opinion. Look at the huge amount of community support we had as a result of that. She said, from what I can tell, you did everything right. You let the conversation unfold. You endeared many to your cause. You allowed your friends and fans to take on the hater and educated many along the way. The only thing you might have considered was learning more about this person so you could better understand where she was on all of her angry posts. And, in some cases like this, if a local person is doing this, I often say to them, if they're not really horrible, it kind of depends. But like this, I might have said, you have some really interesting comments that you've shared. I'd say this in a private message. Would you like to come in to fire camp and talk to the operations and IC about your feelings about things and, take you around fire camp and et cetera? And I invite them in to have a conversation. I would say probably 70 to 80% of the time, they will take me up on that. And I figure if I've given them all the information that I can, if I've shown them our maps, the operations guy answers every question that they want to know. And we don't do this for everybody. We do it when someone is capable of causing community concern, and we'll bring them in. What does it bring? Hold your friends close and your enemies closer. Offer to send her the daily update every single day to her personal email, or offer to something so that this person feels engaged and enclosed in part of you trying to be transparent and share anything that you can with her. it can help. Sometimes it doesn't. When they have an agenda and they're just out to hate you, they, you know, you try, you do your best. You say, well, you try to be friendly. We'll just agree to disagree, and I wish you a nice day. You know, have a nice life.
I think sometimes people can sit behind a keyboard and be pretty feisty and can put their opinion out there, but the minute they're faced with a one-on-one conversation, it changes the whole thing. I know that when I was here 3 years ago on our fire, we had an issue with and I think Kathy might remember this. It was a group that was for protecting some of the older growth trees. We had a crew that was coming in and doing some blasting. Somehow they got left out of the loop about the blasting, and they went on social media kind of on a tirade and started bad-mouthing everything that the team was doing and the operations. And we invited them in, and they sat down with our operations folks, and one-on-one, they were totally fine. They were very nice. They were very respectful. Changed the whole tune. So I think the keyboard warriors we hear about, they're pretty feisty behind the keyboard. But once you get them in a one-on-one situation and you can actually talk to them and explain things to them, I think it really changes. Some you can't, but I think it definitely changes some folks and their attitude.
I was going to, Chris Barr, thank you for that. We had mentioned this before, but sometimes it's not that we ever don't engage directly. It's not that we ever don't correct. But when there's misinformation, like if somebody says the fire's 800 acres or says it's 1,000 acres and it's 800, I might not do it. It's going to be 1,000 pretty soon, so I'm not too worried about the exact acreage. If they say it's 100,000 and it's only 1,000, then I'm going to correct it. If they say homes are evacuated and they're not, I'm going to correct it. And in that case, I may direct them respectfully directly. I may respond to them directly and say, those numbers aren't correct. Right now we have this many evacuated, this many, and I have the flat form, so I'm taking the opportunity to educate them. The evacuation center is located here. People from this are going there. Whatever I need to tell them that gives them as much accurate information, because I have the floor. So I'm going to tell them all the things that I can. I guess the way I judge it is, if it seems like they're asking the question out of genuine curiosity, like, I'm just wondering, why do you do prescribed fire, or something like that, I'll explain why it is we do. If they say, oh, fine, but this is another, if it's just you can imply attitude even over a social media post, and so if they're just being rude, I probably want to address them directly. If they're genuinely asking a question that seems like something, or maybe the question is such that it gives me an opportunity to say something I've been meaning to say, and it gives me an opportunity to do that. But if I feel like it's something everyone should know, like if I see a couple comments we talked about it before, like about yellow shirts in neighborhoods that are evacuated worrying about looting, and I'll see 2 or 3 posts, I'll make sure to put something in the next day's update or do a post on social media that addresses that issue. And I won't say, we're hearing all people talk about it. I'll just say, just to ease some concerns, or to, just to make sure that you feel comfortable with the fact that we appreciate you evacuating when they needed you to, and we're taking care of your thing. We just make a post that addresses that, and it usually calms that down before it becomes a problem. So whether or not you address someone directly, or whether you address the group, or whether you pin something to the top, kind of depends on what they're saying.
Yes, in this instance, I guess you've got this laid out. Would it be good for us to cut and paste these threads and put them in a Word document as the backup in case something happens in the future?
So the question is, the way we have things on what are you looking at?
This, what you've got in the student reference week, you got all these.
The stuff in lessons learned?
Yes. We've got all these.
You mean, are you asking me, is it a good idea if you encounter this to put it in a thread like this to share with people?
No, for us to keep as a backup in case something happens.
Yeah, that's useful for documentation purposes. It's possible for documentation to try to, the way I've put these things together, I've done it for teaching purposes, but it also serves as documentation if you have to go back and explain why especially if you decide to delete someone or block someone or delete comments. You're going to need to back it up. And it's hard, one of our problems with documentation on fires is, how do you capture things like Facebook? I mean, it's so, and not to take a tangent, but I I can't capture everything we post. What I do is if I start to see a problem emerge, I open the whole thing. You know, like this, I'll show you, open the comments and then the replies, so you get everything open, and then capture the whole thing as a PDF and save it, and that goes in the documentation file. And we just do it for the time period the thing is happening, whatever it might be. For routine daily stuff, I don't capture it all, but I do suggest that you capture these because luckily they don't happen that often, and it's really nice to be able to, A, for documentation, and B, to use it as a teaching tool, to be able to share it with people about what happened to you and how did you respond. And I say whether you did well or poorly. You know, how did you respond? If it went poorly, share with us why it went poorly so we know not to do it, you know, because we all need to learn from each other. So this is another one. This was at that Paradise Fire. So initially, the plan was, which didn't work, you know, quite according to plan. I'll see if I can make this so you can see it better. I can't show you this, but it was a video that one of our fire observers has shot. It's about it wasn't a huge fire, but it wasn't a rainforest, so, you know, we didn't expect there to be any fire. So it was about 1,500 acres. And this tree was right on the edge of the main fire. I mean, I think it was even within the fire perimeter. It was just a tree. He was driving around, found it. It was perfect proof. The way this fire was burning was all of the lichen and moss in the trees, which normally is wet. You know, it doesn't take much change in humidity for those things to change. And it was all hanging, it was covering the trees like a rainforest is, but because it was dry, it had all dried out. And so when the fire it looked like the fire was crowning through the whole forest, but it wasn't. It was just spreading moss to moss, lichen to moss, and it was the moss burning. And the moss and lichen would blow off and catch on the lichen on another tree, because, you know, it's rough, and it would hook, and it would start that one on fire. And it looked like the whole thing was burning, but it really wasn't that bad, because the trees weren't burning as much as it was just moss. So he found this tree burning, and I could play you the video, but I won't. But it was a perfect example of how it was burning. And interestingly enough, the fire had sort of started up here. It caught, whatever blew over, caught on some moss on the trunk, because the trunks are covered in moss too, and burned into the branches. The lichens and moss fell off the branches and laid on the ground and blew into other trees and started more. So it was this perfect video, I thought, unbeknownst to me. So what I put was, this is pretty amazing footage of the way the dried lichen has been carrying the Paradise Fire. You can see the fire climb the tree carried by lichen, and then as the lichen burns up, it drops off the tree and carries the fire to the ground. That's how much of the fire is moved forward, carried through the treetops by lichen and continuing the spread as it falls to the ground. I thought, well, we'll educate people about why it's burning. Well, first it turns out the FOBS was wrong. It wasn't all lichen, it was moss. I had to take that one. Also, some things never occurred to me that I would have to explain. And my mistake. I should have known better. Here's the whole discussion about dried moss is extremely flammable. You're right. It's moss, not lichen. Lichens are just flammable mosses when dry, but that's now what's here. I'm like, okay. So, people start commenting. Now, I have to say, as the comments happen, it's very nice to have these people in your back pocket. Roxy is a fire person from Maine who was in our social media class. I'm like, good on you, Roxy. So she's answering the question. Says, it appears you may have missed the information regarding the remoteness of the fire. People, they were asking, why don't you just put it out? There was a question above. I think I must have missed capturing it, but why don't you just put it out? And so she's saying, you might have missed the information that came up earlier about people in structures that are not, there was no people in structures at risk. So why would we put a bunch of people in there on steep slopes fighting a fire that there's nothing, there's smoke, but there's nothing else. Dangerous accessibility and more important, firefighter safety. So she brings that up. Now, the next one is what makes me laugh or roll my eyes or whatever you want to call it. Let me go down here. It's hard without my mouse. Let's see where it is. The person videoing missed the opportunity to put that fire out, but rather chose to watch it burn. I'm like, it never occurred to me, my bad, that somebody would think, this is one tree on a 1,500 acre fire. And it's just the FOBS, but I didn't put that in there. You know, why is he standing there making a movie and not putting this thing out? Someone says, please read this page and learn what's going on here. You're very poorly informed. Let's see. Then I got it in the shorts again. Pretty clueless reporter. Mosses are on the tree trunks and branches here, not lichens. Okay, I hear you. So then you get this one. I can see the point of this video to create an awareness of how fast the fire spreads. So why didn't they put the phone down and try to put it out instead of just sitting there watching it grow and burn up the tree? So you get a lot of people. There's no way to put that out. End of story. Check out then I get these people, check out all the information of where the fire is, how they're managing it, and the way they are. The information is on the Facebook page. It's on what this fire is doing. They're doing an exemplary job of communication. I'm like, oh, look, supporters. Not that good. This article should have been linked to, since every other comment saying the same thing, the information isn't getting around. You've gotten to this anyway. So you get random comments, but it continues to happen. Let's see. We're back to the moss not lichen thing. Let's see. A little bird tells me there's a little bit of lichen on that tree. Thank you, Raven. See, there's some lichen on that tree.
I'm not
Oh.
liking that.
Here's my favorite, though. So why exactly are they purposely setting this tree on fire? It's, and my bad. I should have said in there, I should have anticipated that people would wonder why we're filming a tree on fire at a forest fire, and said, this fire is at the edge of a 1,500-acre fire. It's already within the fire perimeter, and it's one small piece of 1,500 acres, but it would have never occurred to me to say no one set this tree on fire. It happened naturally from lichens that blew across. I thought by explaining this is how the fire is spreading, that would, And Brittany Graham later says, Raven says, read and learn. And she says, I did read. It doesn't explain why they're setting it on fire, just that there's an example of how fast the fire can spread. Someone else says, read and learn, trolls. Just be nice and post a link. Wow, some people's kids. So, somebody then later, I did answer this, because I didn't want anyone to think we had actually, if more people thought. The tree was not set on fire by the person videotaping. This was a fire observer whose job was hiking the fire perimeter to capture fire behavior. All around him was the rest of the 1,000 acres of fire at the time, and his observations allowed and went on to explain what we do with observations from. So then she says, oh, dang, that's a pretty terrifying job. Hope this can be stopped before it does much damage. Okay. Now she understands. Sometimes it seemed important to address in case it got spun out of control, that people thought we were actually lighting the fire to make a video or something. Ron Brown, thank you for the clarification. You're very welcome. It says, Greg, if you look at that video close, you'd see the fire started up the trunk and not the ground up to the trunk. It burned down the trunk onto the ground. I don't care what people say, that fire was set 2 feet up the trunk. Therefore, it was set to show people how the fire... But then somebody said,
Behavior analyst there?
just this guy, Joe Manicky. Actually, Greg Wyatt, this is a perfect example of a spot fire. Spot fire starting with burning embers. And here a very knowledgeable person goes on to talk about fires don't always start from the ground up. Fire doesn't always go up. It can go down, side to side, whatever it wants, especially with embers floating through the air. And then apparently he made some comments about budgeting and funding, and the guy said, the budget you talk about is not it. He goes on to talk about budget. And he says at the end, these fires were not purposely started. The Paradise Fire was started by lightning. Again, the community was there. Okay? So here's another, somebody looked up one reply, and in the replies to that you find this person was commenting that this person said, looked up one reply, and in replies to that you find this. Seeing how the fire burns also lets us build, this is what the FOBs did, remember in part of my answer, which I got cut off, build a plan of action that will be more successful. In this case, fire falls to the ground with fire moss and lichen, where we have said many times water drops have been little help. It can't get through the canopy. This is a rainforest. It's so thick, nothing can get through the canopy. So dropping helicopter water just floated across the top of the leaves. So there wasn't a lot that we could do about it. And this person went and found that comment and reposted it for other people. I just thought it was, this guy, it's frustrating to think that in 2015 people still have a hard time grasping that fire is essential to the ecosystem or even understanding why. This is grade school science. You can't believe how people don't understand fire's place in the ecosystem. So it goes on, and I think let me see. I like this guy's comment. This Tim Bryant down here. Don't just stand there, put it out. Yeah, and then that one over there, and 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 over there. I like. So you get. It's interesting the comments you get. The preponderance was positive support of the issue. I did try to strategically respond. I'm trying to see if there was other places. To that one, I responded. I can tell by our fire information logo. This one, shame on you if you started this fire, not a joke. I just factually said lightning started this fire, not this tree, the entire forest fire in which this tree is burning. Period. No comment, Let me see. Anyway, so I think let me see if it has, at this time, and this was not that long, this was during it, had over 47,000 views of that video. I think it was well up over 100,000, but last time I looked.
So to get this information, because if you were on a team and you were leaving and this was your last day,
Uh-huh.
and you had this going on, you would really want to tell the team after you. To get this information and all the shots that you got, so you can prep them to know what's going on. Do you just screenshot it? Is that how you got all this from it?
What I did was I go in and as I said, and I did. You could tell I didn't open all of them, but you try to open everything. You have to open all the replies, all the windows, till the whole thing is open. And then I start at the top corner. I just drag down the whole thing all the way down the bottom of the page, and then I dump it into a Word document. And then you have a bunch of spaces. It takes a while to to go back in and delete all the spaces to make it a little bit closer together, like this is. Get rid of so that you can see the flow of information.
That
But
would be nice to hand off if it was
Yeah.
last day to have all the information instead of having to go back and do all the comments to put it in a Word document.
yeah, and I would probably, if it happened during my shift, this would be something I'd say, well, maybe we ought to document this, just in case. And I threw a copy in the documentation file and mentioned to them that this is, I think it was pretty much over. There's not a lot they can do about it. The comments might continue. I guess what you can do is you can stop the comment thread on this on one post. You can say, we're not allowing comments on this post anymore. But I thought a lot of good came out of this. I mean, there was a ton of stuff said that really showed an educated public that certainly didn't speak up on a daily basis. I mean, I didn't know they were out there. I didn't know that, and they really. I just thought it was a good conversation, and I thought they ended up talking about subjects that, we weren't really talking about that much. So, I thought it worked.
There's one comment
Yeah.
that says as you see the reoccurring things in the comments, I know you can address them or create a separate post, but you can ever make an edit to the original post, add more people, and comments to be repeated by people.
Okay, so let me read this into people who are online could see this. The one, Brandlin. Hi, Brandlin. When you see recurring themes, you can address them or create a separate post, but would you make an edit to the original post to add more details from being these comments repeated? You could go in and edit the post, and if there was something and you say, I might not edit it in such a way that you couldn't tell I'd put it in. I might put down and say, update. We want to make clear that this blah, 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 and, this tree was not started on fire. It was a fire observer that happened to find a tree within the fire perimeter that was just catching, and, it's only one tree in 1,000 acres of other trees on fire. We could have but I would have put it as an update. I wouldn't, redo my paragraph, so if people went back and said, oh, now they're redoing that, I'd make it clear. This is what we posted originally. We stand by that, but here we're adding the update to it. Any other questions?
Just to add to this, what you guys are seeing here is pretty common, and this happens a lot. I'd venture to say it happens probably at 90% of the fires we go to. And it's the same stuff. People think that firefighters are not out there doing anything. They want to let it burn. Why didn't they put it out right away? They just want money from it. They just want to run up bills, that kind of stuff. You're going to see it, and you'll quickly learn where you should step in and make comments like the one quick one that said, no, this was started by lightning. You can correct that. That way, that doesn't keep going. Because as you see, once a rumor gets started, it goes back and forth for a long time. If you can, with a very factual statement, cut something off like, this was human caused, and you go in there and you say, no, this is lightning caused, you can save yourself a lot of time. But you'll see that this is a pretty reoccurring theme. When we were, again, on the Chetco bar fire, that fire was burning for quite a while before the fire actually took off. I want to say almost like a month or something. That thing was burning before it took off. My team showed up the day that it did grow very large, and we evacuated thousands of people. And we got the most of the calls that we got were why they didn't put it out at the beginning. Why the hell is that crew that went out there? And that wasn't our place to answer that. So we had to watch some really ugly conversations go on online about why this fire wasn't put out in the beginning. So if you're the incoming team, don't get into that. You're there to talk about the fire, and it's important to not try to get into that black hole of shoulda, coulda, woulda, because you're just there for the fire.
Toward that particular end, I know that in some places, like in the Pacific Northwest, they're starting to have people work the first teams in, type 3 teams, or the initial attack, capture what actually happened. Capture what did you send, and this is something for you to know as PIOs, that you're going to send it out on your social media when you get it approved. But we're trying to capture the early days of a fire, because it is awkward for the incoming team to not be able to answer questions because they weren't there when this started. They can't deal with those trolls online that are saying these things because they say, I'm just here to talk about the fire we inherited today or yesterday, so I wasn't here at the beginning, and they refer those back to the forest. But we're trying to tell people nowadays that preparing those initial timelines on the initial start of a fire, even just out of the dispatch logs, what did you send? We sent 3 engines, 2 heliattack. The heliattack couldn't go in. The helicopter came back because the smoke came in, or the wind blew, or the terrain was too steep and the crew wouldn't go in, or whatever your reasons were. So that later, when this comes back to bite you, you can say, we did go in, and you can give Dawn or the incoming team information about, so they know what to say. We could say, this is the detailed timeline of what happened when this fire started, and they can answer that question because you have it, you have it written down. I'll show you this other one. This is the one that just happened on the Tahoe memorial that we did. And this was this. So people are sending the usual, what an incredible send off for Dan. Our engine was right in line behind whatever. Agency people responding. Then you get down here a little further and praying for the family, thankful for his service, thank you, sorry for the loss of another, rest in peace, blah, blah, blah. And then this, which is not wrong, but it was like, all right, yes. Fatality status is provisional and may change as U.S. Fire Administration contacts state fire marshals to verify fatality incident information. So he got this from somewhere. This is inside information. This comes from a statement from somebody, and I don't know who. I think it might have been from the chief, but somebody gave this person, or he has access to inside information. It has all this stuff. See, age 41, rank captain, aircraft vehicle collision, nature of death, trauma, vehicle, all this stuff. Memorial fund information. I think it was the chief's letter, since it says Chief Vicki Christensen at the bottom. Okay, not wrong. Just sort of inappropriate on a memorial page, but, it's not wrong. That is what happened. I don't think I saved everything. But the weird thing was, he wasn't responding to people. He was just posting. He just kept posting, serial posting. The deceased firefighter was, and they were there on an area of ignition. Their equipment was dropping plastic spheres. This man died in a prescribed burn. Now, when you put quotes around something, it means you're saying it's not really this. It's just sort of this. It was a prescribed burn. I don't know why you would put it. Would be a true statement if you said this man died in a prescribed burn while on a prescribed burn. He didn't die in the prescribed burn. He didn't die of the prescribed burn. He died in a helicopter crash. Again, they're just details. He's not wrong. It's not, again, just slightly inappropriate on this particular page.
You think he's just kind of fishing to try to get somebody to reply?
Well, that's what I did. So somebody says, actually it was a helicopter crash. He says, yep, during a prescribed burn in Texas. Now, he's obviously got, and he was not, he's got 3 in a row. He was not piloting the helicopter. And then the deceased firefighter was this, or okay, and then these weird sort of statements. Again, just to me kind of inappropriate. Then he says he was starting fires, not putting them out. And all these are serial posts from him. He's not saying it in response to something. And we had a lot of people responding on the page, like his family, Daniel's family, saying, get this guy off this page, And you're like, well, he hasn't really said anything. He was starting fires. That's what we do in prescribed burning. And this guy says that's what RX Fire does, works off a burn plan with resources. Mike Simmons, kill people? Now we're starting to get into...
That's where you start crossing the line.
Yeah. Now, and it isn't that he said, yes, but he died doing a prescribed fire. That would be true. This is incendiary. So you just have to use, it's subjective. You have to use your own judgment about what's okay and what's not. More and more. This is him, serial again. Kill people? Were you there? Then he puts this statement from the chief again. Then he states again, it doesn't state he was working for the U.S. Forest Service at his time of death. Then he says, I breed too much wild for me to fall for their smoke and mirrors press releases and hero worship for dead good men. Hope everyone enjoyed their paid leave as mourners. Now we're bordering on not okay. I mean, we're right on not okay. Mostly because we know that the family is looking at this. And this page was meant to honor this person. What is the point here? What is the point exactly? But he's talking a lot about this. I've dealt too much with wildfire emissions. He's got something about the emissions from prescribed fire and that it's killed someone when in the way I read it, he doesn't see why that happened why we're doing it in the first place. So they address the one who said, yeah, but it's whatever, and it says Mike, the other guy, this guy's a clown. I've known Daniel since 2003. So then he starts on prescribed burns release these things. Nanoparticles, hundreds of others, volatile organic compounds according to the EPA. And he puts that information in here. Again, not wrong. She's just responding, oh, clown, huh? And then he says, Christopher Lowe, were you there? Can you speak to the facts of the case? It's very important for you to speak facts. Please document any details in writing. Thank you. This type of post tends to get many, and I like hers. Your lack of respect says more about you than the Forest Service. Thank you for your input, as the saying goes, and removing all doubt. Well, and we did look at his page, and it was some fake page. It wasn't it didn't have any information in it. This type of post gets many automatic bot algorithm responses. I'm like, we're just responding. I guess I'm kind of a bot, maybe, But then he starts going on about the gases and about the ozone layer. And the ozone layer has a half-life of 3 days, so this tells you to be completely dissipated and gone after 12, so figure it out. Radon gas was not discovered He obviously had an agenda. This one, trusting the family has retained excellent legal litigation counsel. So, all I'm saying is, it comes in all forms. And sometimes it's just disrespectful. Sometimes it's right, but just an opinion you don't like to hear. And I'm very careful about right, but opinions you don't like to hear. Because people are entitled to that. They're entitled to express those opinions. Again, I guess using my friend's, the lawyer's standard, which is, what would you allow at a public meeting? Think about what you would allow if you're at a public meeting with people addressing these issues. Would you be okay with him talking about the ozone layer? I guess at some point, I would probably, at a public meeting, and I don't know what the forum is here, but at a public meeting, I would stand up and say, I appreciate your opinion about that, but this meeting is about X, and let's let other people comment on things that pertain to what this meeting is for, and try to move things past that. It's not germane to the conversation right now. Let's move on past that. In this, we were discussing at lunch, and I think that's probably a good idea. And I didn't know this. As I told you, I'm not the person who knows every detail of every tool, but I think the idea of at this point, hiding somebody's comment. And the reason hiding is different than deleting is if you hide it, it doesn't appear in your timeline. So all the people looking at the memorial page would no longer see that comment. But you didn't delete it. He can still see it. When he looks at the page, he still sees his comment. So he doesn't know that you've hidden his comment. Right? And on your page, if he continues to respond to it or people respond, it's grayed out. You can see it on your page, but it's gray to remind you that it's hidden, so you could see if there were other responses to it. So I wasn't sure if hiding would hide it from them too, and it would be, I'm like, well, if you're going to hide it, just delete it. But if it's very different then. If they can continue to see it on their page, and their friends that follow their timeline could see it, but on your page where you're trying to keep things and they're entitled to have that conversation, but on your page where you're trying to keep it respectful,
30 days thing.
yeah, click on hide. So, and it continued. It went on and on for days, even after we left, even after the memorial, after everything. And obviously, this was during the processional and things. So this was one of those things that one of the things to think about when you're leaving a fire is the transition plan you have that you hand off to the PAO left on the forest. Well, it now needs to include what social media hanging chads do you have? What's still hanging out there? What like this guy do you still have? And so we had to. I usually lift. Here's the issue, and here's my recommendation for whatever issue we have left. You have this guy. He's made these comments. Here's a copy of all the things we copied. That we did. These are the steps we took. We recommend that you do the following things, but whatever you choose to do. But you need to remember all of these. If you have problems with people or somebody who's really angry at you, remember the Cathys of the world, the public affairs people left behind. They're going to live with this for the next year and a half, and you're going to go home. So you need to let them know the ones that could potentially cause them trouble. Okay, does that make sense? Any other questions?
I want to talk about a story that we had, situation we had on a fire in Colorado. And it kind of goes along these lines of people just continuing to post and things getting stirred up. We had some problems basically with donations. That's kind of one of my things I don't like to deal with. Anybody that knows me knows. So we had a lot of the community wanted to donate to the firefighters, and we had some folks going online, and they started in their groups with firefighters needed toothbrushes and toothpaste and the whole 9 yards, right? And this was that fire I had talked about that had snowed and it was like 26 degrees. So they were wanting blankets for firefighters and all kinds of things. And so we started getting truckloads basically of stuff, and we couldn't handle it. People were bringing carloads, literal carloads of filthy, gross blankets out of their closets that nobody even wanted to touch. So in trying to stop the donations, we put up a post, and it's one that a lot of us use on teams. It's basically asking for donations. If you want to donate to the Wildland Firefighter Foundation, local fire departments, down the whole list. And it's a standard one that we always use. And this one nonprofit who had showed up to camp on day 2 to help, and they ended up in our ICP just kind of hanging out, taking pictures of things on the wall before we kicked them out. They claimed that they were a nonprofit. They claimed that they work with FEMA. They had all these claims, right? And it sounded legit. We didn't have a job for them. We kicked them out. And so they got online, and they posted under our place of where people could donate, telling us that in asking the community to donate to an outside organization, we're pulling money from the community, and that we were being unfair to the community and the nonprofit locally that wanted to help. So they jumped in and they said, here's our nonprofit, please donate to us. This is what we need. Toothbrush, blankets, on and on, right? We get on and we say, well, your local departments are here. This is what we've been told. And they started going on the other community pages and talking about how we were taking money away from the local community and how the firefighters needed blankets and things, and they went down the whole list again, and things continue to show up. They went to Home Depot and asked Home Depot to run a drive for smoke detectors for the residents, and we had 4 houses that burned. One of them was a permanent resident, the rest were vacation homes. They were asking for smoke detectors, and Home Depot caught on because they were a nonprofit. They helped FEMA. They did this whole fundraiser, and they got boxes and boxes of smoke detectors. Well, the county kind of went through and said, we don't need smoke detectors. Nobody here needs these. Well, they continued with their campaign of they're going to help firefighters. They had one of their volunteers claim that they were out on the line with an engine, and the person in the engine had no boots, and so they literally gave them the boots off of their feet. And they were telling these sob stories to the public and making us look bad. And we started doing a little investigation, and they were not a nonprofit. We weren't quite sure to go about it because now they're these heroes of the fire. They've got Home Depot on board. They were literally serving at restaurants, and restaurants would donate a whole day's earnings to this nonprofit to help these people. They were doing clothing drives and asking for things like diapers. Well, the one house that burned, it was a young couple that had no kids. So these guys were asking for all kinds of donations that didn't even go to this fire. So we ended up having to bring the county involved. They would message our page and tell us that we needed to take posts down. They threatened to sue us. They wanted our names, individual names of who was answering the phone. We'd answer and say, "This is Dawn. How can I help you?" "Oh, your name's Dawn. What's your last name?" You're telling you're telling our community that you're going to take money out of our community and you're affecting us. So we had to go through the county, and the county kind of dealt with it. They didn't really shut it down as well as I thought they would shut it down, but they did. We had to document every bit of that, and the second team coming in, we had to make sure that they knew who these people are. They've actually kind of surfaced again recently. They haven't been as big as they were last time, but those are the kinds of things that can start on Facebook pages, and you just kind of have to deal with it how you can. Try not to get involved. But the post can just absolutely go out of control, especially with the threats of suing, and they're writing your names down and doing all the things that they claim they're going to do. It can go downhill in a hurry. But just another example of how these things get going and people just start going down a huge snowball of social media.
I think the lesson is that when it goes bad on social media, it goes bad big. That's the problem. You know, it used to be if the newspaper printed the wrong thing, you know, you correct it at your next public meeting and the 12 people who live in town see it, you know. But now it gets big quickly. And I think that's the fear of higher ups in all our agencies when they talk about approving people to do social media or not, is that do you have the judgment to know and to handle the bad situations? Nobody's concerned about the good situations. Nobody's concerned about what you're doing when you talk about the fire. They're concerned about what happens when it goes bad and when something like this happens. And, you know, like in the case of the worst case scenario is social media when you have a fatality. And what I keep telling people now, it used to be the way it's always been. You have the critical incident guide for agency administrators. It tells you who does what and the order it follows. And on that, they used to tell us it's going to be like a day or two before you get back confirmation the family's been notified and all that comes back to you. Fact of the matter is you have about 10 minutes. About 10. And you better be ready to make a statement at 10 minutes. Now, do you know anything more than you used to know? No. But it's what happened, and I don't think it necessarily, not always, I can even know percentages, but I've seen it happen this way. It doesn't necessarily happen through malicious intent. Let's take, for instance, there was a helirepeller accident in Northern California. I can't remember where it was, and on the Six Rivers, I think. And it was a currency. He was doing a currency rappel, and he hooked in wrong, and when he went out of the helicopter, dropped to the ground, and it killed him. How many people are at a base like that? There's a lot of people there, and they took pictures. One guy because everybody takes pictures. Everybody takes movies. Everybody takes videos of the response as everyone rushes to the person. Everybody does it. So as they did that, somebody sent it to his wife. Somebody on the ground said, "Oh my God, you won't believe what just happened here." Now, there's no malicious intent. He's sharing his day saying, "Oh my God, this horrible thing happened at work today." And I think this guy got killed. And so what does his wife do? She posted it on her Facebook page. "My husband just sent me this horrible thing happened." She doesn't know. They're just sharing information. Nobody along this whole chain of command has said, "I'm sending this, but for God's sake, don't send it to anyone." And he sent it because he was horrified. I mean, he was just like, oh my God, this thing happened. And sends it. Within 15 minutes, it's out. And boom, once it's out, that's it. It's everywhere, just like that. So, you know, when I had a fatality in Texas, I remember we were on Facebook, and I had a trainee working with me. There was only me and this one other guy, and he wasn't very good at social media. But when I heard it was the IC and ops and I were standing outside, the safety officer, listening to the radio, hearing them call for life flight, hearing them cancel light flight, waiting to see what exactly was going to happen. And I went into the guy who was monitoring, and I said, keep your eye on the Facebook page and everywhere. The minute you see something, anyone say anything, I need you to monitor. Unfortunately, he didn't really know how to monitor. There were a lot of places he could have looked to get Twitter is the thing I would go to right now to monitor that kind of thing, because it would come up. And monitor and see when it comes up. And we had about 15 minutes is about how long it took before something popped up on a station in Houston, and they had heard it on a scanner or something else. You know, they can tune into the radio channels you have, the emergency channels at the fire, and somebody got it and out it went. So I don't know, you have to be, you know, when we do the advanced PIO class in 952, and we work on the special situations part, there's a part where we take them through an exercise that isn't part of a test, but that is, I have these 18 situations where something bad happens, and this is all you know. So Forest Service helicopter went down on BLM land with a state crew. You have 15 minutes to come up with your first statement. But I don't know anything. Doesn't matter. You still got to make a statement. That's what you know. Make a statement. Now, as I keep telling people, you always have something you can say, but you're going to need to monitor social media and find out. You don't need to make the statement really until you see something hit. And the minute it hits, you have to be after it. So you have to spend that time preparing to deal with what comes on social media, because you are going to have to say something on social media. So you better think about what. As soon as it happens, think about what you're going to say. Yes?
You said that they heard from a scanner in Houston about the chopper program,
No, it wasn't Houston.
or wherever it was.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, the guy worked there at the air base in Six Rivers, and his wife was, I don't know where.
Okay, but and you wanted to try to get that on social media as quick as you could. How do you substantiate that they knew that there was a fatality? I mean,
I don't want to put information about a fatality.
okay, all right, repeat what you were saying.
I'm trying to say you have to be, once you see it appear, like on a TV station calls you or a radio station calls and says, I heard about this fatality, and I'm saying, where did you hear about that? Where did you hear something like that? And they say whatever they hear. And I still can't confirm, you know, I can confirm we had a helicopter to go down. At the time, we still had life flight. I didn't know what, you know, we don't know anything. But what you can say is, you know, I don't, to a media person, I would say, I'm just gathering information. We have had something happen, but I don't know any details. And I take their number and I say, I have to go talk to somebody, because I do. I'm telling them the truth. I need to go find out what actually happened. I'm not going to speculate about what I heard on the radio. I'm not going to speculate toward any of that. But the social media part, when all of a sudden I see on, it goes to, say, Wildfire Today website. It appears on Wildfire Today, who has a lot of credibility. Bill Gabbert's page. If it appears on his page that it appears there's an accident going on something, then I know that I'm going to start hearing from everyone. I have got to come up with a statement. And those statements aren't things like, this is what we know happened, because often we don't know what happened yet. But what we can do is we can say, what are the things we can say? We can say, we know we've had an accident. We know it involved a helicopter. We're not releasing tail numbers. We're not releasing company. We're not releasing the name. We may not even be releasing fatality if we don't know yet. Maybe they're on their way to the hospital and we don't know. There were 3 on board. That's all we don't, you know, we don't have any information on injuries, which is all we refer to, you know, at that time. We don't have any information. But any time, then there's always the statement of, I call it the our hearts go out statement. There's always the, whenever things like this happen in the Forest Service family, it's hard for everyone. It's a close-knit community. We'll let you know as soon as we have more information about what happened. That's all you have to say, but you have to say something. So I'm just saying that the minute if you're running social media, the minute something like that happens, you got to be monitoring for it and be ready and start working on what you can say in response. Gather all the information and intel you can, so you do have something to say. Unless all you have to say is the our hearts go out statement, and that may be all you have. Did you have something?
There was a question online of what was the outcome of my donation fraud story. There really wasn't a good outcome to that story. On our end, as the IMT, once the lawsuit started being threatened publicly on the Facebook page, we started hiding the comments. That was what we were instructed to do by the county. The county sheriff's office is the one that we turned it over to. The county is a small county. They were pretty overwhelmed with the fire itself, as well as this other mess. They really didn't deal with it very well, in my opinion. We kind of just pushed it under the rug and it went away. We ended up with like literally piles of blankets nobody wanted. Nobody would take them, not even the animal shelters. But as far as them being shut down, they weren't. I'm local to that community, so it's a little frustrating seeing that they're still there. They are tied as a religious group as well, so that's another thing that people don't really want to touch with this group. So they're still there, unfortunately. That situation hasn't happened again, thankfully, and I hope that it doesn't, but that really was the outcome. There wasn't a whole lot. So
I think donations are the next big, incident within an incident. It takes all of your attention. Especially, the worst part is when you have an incident within an incident that is based in people doing something thoughtful and good. I mean, how do you say stop giving? But it happens a lot. GoFundMe pages are started. And have you been hearing in the news about the fraud on GoFundMe pages? And they're really trying to crack down on it. But we often have that when there's a fatality, somebody starts a page, and then what we found is the way to combat it, because it spreads on social media like crazy, and people want to do something. That's the thing you got to harness, is people want to do something, and social media gives you a way to do that, but you got to think about how you're going to do that. So when it comes to like fatalities, or when we have memorials and people start them, is we ask the families, where would you like the money? If people want to give to your son or to something, where would you like the money to go? And then we make sure to post, the family has requested only one site for donation, this one. The family's requested it. And most people will go there. Most people will go there. And we don't address, there may be other fraudulent sites, there may be we just don't go there. But if the media asks us, and they say, well, there's this other GoFundMe, say the family has asked that donations go to this place. So that donations can be kind of a nightmare. I mean, and it blows up. We had the same thing happen with donations where people, they wanted to give, we had this happen in Alaska where there's a fire, and excuse me, people, the community wanted to make dinner for the firefighters, which they actually, I was surprised, but the team said, okay, we can arrange that. We can bus the firefighters over to the high school and the community can have dinner for them. Well, so the community is trying to organize on this community page about everything they're going to do. Then the politicals said, nope, we got this. And they got the barbecues and all the food donated by the oil companies. And then they came in and they said, we're going to barbecue and we're going to cook all the dinner. And I'm like, oh. Because this all started because the community wanted to give back. Remember, your job is to find an outlet for this need to do something. We can't just say, nope, sit over there, we don't need your help anymore. You have to find some. And I called several politicians and said, this is going to be an issue. You can't just take over their idea, and it's not right. So I said, at least, so the end result was we agreed on the community would make desserts. So the community, huge supply of desserts. I mean, stuff everywhere, and the politician cooked burgers, and everybody was happy. And the firefighters came in, and people stood up and applauded every time a crew walked in. It was let them cut in front of line. It was great. The crews were they come in, they're all black, and they're just like, little stunned. Been eating MREs for 3 weeks, and now this. Okay, but it went over fine. But your job, and it was going crazy on social media. That I think I showed you, that community, Funny River community Facebook page just blew up with people saying, why can't we, and how come they? And it was just getting angry. And I sent it to one of the politicians and said, look at this. This is going to be bad for you, and it's going to be bad for the team. You've got to do something about this. We have to fix this. And I think finding outlets for them, I think if you find the outlets, it won't, before that, what do you call it, the The energy behind that kind of angst starts to grow on social media, and you can see it building, and you have to get to it before it builds and come up with an outlet. What can we do? You know, we had the community, one of our best ideas is having the community make little cards, and the kids would do them, the families would do them, and they'd fold them in half, and they'd draw little pictures, and they'd say, "Thank you, firefighters," on the inside. And hundreds of them, and we gave them to the caterer, and they put in firefighter lunches. So when the firefighters, I mean, talk about getting it right to the people that mattered. But it gave them an outlet. It gave the information and the thank you directly to the firefighters. Have them do big banners that they put out in bars, and people color and write thank yous, and we put it on the food trailer, you know, so they can read it when they come through for dinner. Be creative, outside the box. You got to find an outlet, or you're going to see that momentum build on social media.
Yeah, and Chris kind of covered most of that, but just want to reiterate how social media can blow up the donation thing when you go on fires. And it's gotten really bad lately, and you try to catch that before it gets to a point where you cannot handle what's coming in, because you have to deal with all this stuff, and you're going to have to work with logistics. And my logistics section chief does not like to deal with hordes of donations that I just pass off on her. So up front, pay attention to what people are asking for, because you'll find it very, very quickly. We had a situation last year where the local fire department truly couldn't support themselves in the first 2 days of the fire, so they legitimately asked for certain things. Well, once the team comes in, we're taken care of, but we had people driving 4 and 5 hours with truckloads of donations that they had asked for. The fire department had no more room for anything. The food bank donated to the fire, so we had to donate the food back to the food bank. We had food and stuff everywhere. So the sooner you can jump on that, and the sooner you pay attention to what's happening on social media with those requests, the better you are catching that early, especially with the GoFundMes too. Find out the sources of those, and if it truly is a legitimate source from the fire department or one of the local agencies, you can utilize that and direct people there. But try to find a place to send that energy, because they're just trying to do right for the firefighters, and they're trying to give them their appreciation, but there's times where it becomes the incident within the incident. So trying to find that energy and pushing it off early is key.
Okay, so we're a little early done with this session, but what I'd like to do is we'll take a break here. If you guys could take half hour or so to take a break and work a little more on your blog pages. And the reason I say that is in the end of this, tomorrow at the end, we're going to have sort of a final scenario where we're going to expect you to use all your tools. So I want you to have some familiarity. You can do this. I want you to have some familiarity with the tools. You two can work as a team. How's that? You can. And so continue to practice on those, but also take a break. And then for people online, we will once again, we're going to be back at 3:15 Eastern time. So everyone here is just going to work on continuing to build their blog and experiment with stuff. Go ahead.
One last comment. Are you ever proactive about where the public can donate before it all blows up?
No, she just said preemptive.
Preemptive. Yes, I think we all have some canned statements of where people can donate, which are usually the Wildland Firefighter Foundation, the local fire departments. Usually the donations start rolling in before the team comes in, but if you guys are on a fire, we can get that. I have a document somewhere. We'll get it to you guys. You can send that canned information out. Hey, if you want to help firefighters, these are ways that you can support firefighters. We've done the letters and lunches things. We've done sending thank yous on Facebook. But if you get that going sooner, before that stuff even comes up, yes, we do that all the time. And it helps.
Yeah, I totally agree. The other thing we've done is a YouTube channel where families can make little videos of thank yous for the firefighters, and we've shown them at night in the food tent, when people are saying thank you to firefighters. There's all kinds of, again, be creative, think outside the box, whatever you have to do to make it happen. But yeah, preemptively getting ready for it, because it's going to happen. It will happen, and it will get out of control very quickly if you're not prepared for it.
And the one last thing I'll add is if you want to do things like adding letters and lunches or getting handwritten notes and taping it to the caterer, make sure you get that okay before you have those requests. Last year we had a caterer that got really, really mad at us because the heat transferred the glue onto the side of his trailer. and he was a very, very unhappy man. So I probably will never ever tape thank yous to a food trailer again.
You know, the unintended consequences of a meeting, you know, trying to act. Yes.
I had a food unit later say we can't put anything in lunch.
Oh, see, and he was saying for those online that he's been a food unit leader that wouldn't put anything in the lunches. I've had that. It happened once, but it was relatively rare, thankfully. Usually they're happy to do whatever they need. It takes a little more time, and they ask to get them to them by 8 in the morning. I mean, you need to have them there on time and work within their schedule if they'll do it. It's just an option. You got to have a whole bevy of things. So we'll put that whatever paper you have, we'll put it in the student resources folder under resources, so that you'll have that as well. Okay, so again, we'll be back 3:15 to do a little bit on when to engage, when not to engage, but not very much later.